distinguished panelists, dear colleagues and experts, in the name of our partners in the Geneva Water Hub, I would like to warmly thank the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation in China, General Institute of Water Resources and Hydropower Planning and Design of the Chinese Ministry of Water Resources, and the Chinese Academy of Sciences for inviting us today to present this session on transboundary aquifer management in different regions. My name is Jean Villemain. I work as a senior project officer at the Geneva Water Hub. We do appreciate the opportunity to be able to exchange experiences and best practices on this most important topic of sustainable groundwater management. So prior to present the three panelists you'll be having today on this session, let me first provide you with some information and background on our work and its relation to groundwater. The Geneva Water Hub is a center of competences specialized in hydropolitics and water diplomacy. It's attached to the University of Geneva and the Graduate Institute of Geneva. Today we have the pleasure to co-host this session with our partners of Pôle Dakar, the Dakar Water Hub, which is attached to the Ministry of Water of Senegal, but also to institutions and university of the region. Together, we share the same vision and mandate, which is to promote water as a source of instrument of peace. So it is based on the main driving idea that water may be a source of conflict, but it can also be a vehicle for cooperation. And experience show that in many situations, rather than causing open conflicts, the need to manage water sharing generates cooperation between various stakeholders. So disputes over water can be managed diplomatically, and water sharing, moreover, can become a field of collaboration in conflict situation. You'll have the chance today to see some concrete examples in different regions. So this vision is, of course, really at the heart of the Blue Peace movement, which has been spearheaded by the SDC at the global level, and together with our partners, we are part of this movement. And the first major diplomatic initiative regarding the Blue Peace movement was the creation of the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace, which has received a mandate from 15 co-convening countries to study the link between water, peace, and security at the global level. This panel has is at work between 2015 and 2017, and the Geneva Water Hub has acted as the secretariat of this panel. You see here the 15 panelists, which were designated by the countries, not in the name of representative of the government, but as independent experts to implement the mandate bestowed by the 15 states. So this panel was chaired by Dr. Danilo Turk, former president of Slovenia, and Senegal took a very active part in this panel by taking the vice chair with former Minister of Water Mansour Faye. In 2017, so the panel released its report called A Matter of Survival, which is the first landmark report that positioned water at the global level at the crossroad between water, peace, and security. It is still a very influential document in the current discussion on UN reforms. This report has been presented to the UN General Assembly in 2017 and to many governments around the world. In relation to groundwater, of course, panel stressed really the need to engage on the production of knowledge, both some quantitative and qualitative data. That was a major point at its chapter 4. And you'll see today with the example of the Geneva's aquifer that this is really what spearheaded the cooperations on the transboundary level between France and Switzerland. Of course, the panel also stressed the need for water cooperation and transboundary water cooperation. That is institution that needs to address the need to resolve water conflict at the local level, at the trans-sectoral level, but also the transboundary level. And so today you'll have the chance to see the example of the Senegal River Development Organization and the Gambia River, both institutions that have really influenced a lot the panel and selection with this vision. Also at the level of what's the panel called people diplomacy, intersectoral management of water, the panel really stressed the need to also engage on some specific sector that have a strong effects on water resources, such as the mining industry, that do have its severe effects for local communities living just next to mining sites. Today, you'll have the chance, Iraq, to see one example of these challenges in Chile. So last but not the least, the main message of this panel was to address the key issue of fragmental institution that we can find at the national level, but also at the international level. It has recommended to have a network of actors engaged on water diplomacy. And the main tool also to implement this approach is what the panel called the safe space. So to organize spaces where stakeholders can engage and discuss to prevent conflict, but also to have this very important first step to align vision to engage on a specific water cooperation project. So in relation to groundwater, this is one approach we implemented as the Geneva Water Hub. We recommend, also promote the recommendation of this panel, but we implement also on some of them. And so, West Africa, we contributed to the initiation of a transboundary cooperation on the Senegal-Mauritanian Aquifer Basin, together with the UNICE Water Convention Secretariat, IGRAC. And so this aquifer basin is shared between 4 countries, namely the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Mauritania, and Senegal. So on the map, the global map, you see, can see here where it's located, the very western part of West Africa. Here is a mapping of all the transboundary aquifers in the world, and of course, the panel stressed the need to have more governance agreements. So this is one current engagement of 4 countries spearheading this governance agreement. Of course, the same recommendation applies to national aquifers that also needs to address the key challenge of resolving conflict between different types of water users. So if we take a closer look at the SMAB, Senegal Aquifer Senegal-Mauritania Aquifer Basin, you can see that it's located so on the shore of these 4 countries. It's provide water security of the capital of Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, and Senegal to a certain part also from Mauritania. But Mauritania also has a connection with the Senegal River surface water to provide its water security for its capital, Nouakchott. So you can see here there's a great connectiveness between the 4 countries, and this is also thanks to these 2 key institutions, so the OMVS and OMVG, with whom the countries also have experience over 50 years of transboundary cooperation at the surface water level. These 2 basins, Senegal River and Gambia River, covers about 50% of the surface of the aquifer basin, SMAB. So it is seen as a key institutional assets that could develop conjunctive surface and groundwater approaches. And that will be one of the first ever example in the world of 2 basin agencies engaging together and jointly engaging on the management of a basin aquifer. So this dialogue has been spearheaded by the states themselves with the constitution of a regional working group that the Hub has contributed to induce. The dialogue has started in February 2019 with the first ever exchange on the state of knowledge between these 4 countries on the groundwater resources. It has quickly had some political uptakes because already in September 2021, the 4 water ministries of these 4 countries decided to sign the ministerial declaration on the SMAB, which initiates the process of setting up a legal and institutional framework on the SMAB. Validates also a regional project that the regional working group has produced itself to induce this cooperation. And so strengthen this mandate of this regional working group composed of the 4 countries. the two basin agencies, but also the Observatoire for the Sahara and Sahel. And so the ministries provided the mandates to OMVS, OMVG to host the secretariat of the regional working group, but also to manage the regional projects to induce water cooperation. So after this introduction, let me now present you our panel session for today. And first introducing Dr. Gabriel de los Cobos, that will present you the cooperation on the Genevese aquifer shared between France and Switzerland, which is a very interesting example because it's the first ever example of artificial recharge of an aquifer, but also the transboundary agreement on an aquifer. So Dr. Gabriel de los Cobos is a geologist and hydrologist. He has been since 1998 the head of the geology and groundwater section of the state of Geneva in Switzerland. And in this capacity, he's also a member of the Transboundary Committee for the Genevese Groundwater Management, which has the mandates to manage this Genevese aquifer. So please, Gabriel, over to you for your presentation of 7 minutes. Thank you.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde. Je remercie les organisateurs pour m'avoir invité.
Good morning, and I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me. I would like to share my screen now.
Comme ça. Voilà, est-ce que vous voyez mon écran?
I do hope that you can see my screen. Yes, it's okay, we can see your screen.
Ah, mais attendez, j'ai un petit souci parce que je voudrais le...
Sorry, I have a small technical concern here.
Comme ça. Ouais. Attendez, je vais reprendre le... Voilà, je peux penser comme ça.
Let me try again to have best view possible for the slides.
Il faut baisser la projection si jamais on voit comme les slides, même s'ils sont réduits.
Oui, parce que j'arrive pas à le mettre sous forme présentation.
Bon, I'm just trying to present it in a better way, but without further ado and without losing time, I would like to show you the management of the Geneva aquifer. I will be doing it in French, and you can see Switzerland is a small country in the heart of Europe. It's not part of the EU. The canton of Geneva is in the far west of Switzerland. It has a 200 kilometers border with France, and only 6 kilometers are joining with other cantons. That is why Geneva is very much involved in cross-border management of the aquifer. The canton has 4 main aquifers. Drinking water is provided by 2 stations and 11 wells in the water table, which is 80% of the drinking water. the water table of Great Geneva area is the biggest aquifer. There are 10 wells on the Swiss side and 4 wells on the French side. So it's an aquifer which is truly transboundary. And this aquifer is constituted by glaciers, fluvioglacial deposits. It has great performance in terms of permeability and hydrogeological features, which are interesting. It has also a natural protection, although some points of vulnerability can be seen in its longitudinal profile, as can be seen here. Now, to come back to the background and history, we can see that between 1940 and 1960, there was a considerable decrease of water table without major consequence. But between 1960 and 1980, it has been overexploited with a pumping of more than 14 million cubic meters, and this reduced the level of water by 8 meters in 20 years. So some measures had to be taken in terms of hydraulic management. Two solutions were possible, either to reduce like building a new or creating an MAR, as it has already been explained today, with the managing aquifer recharge. And so two criteria led to the choice. That is the criteria for the security of supply, to have a diversification of supply resources, and obviously an economic criteria, because the cost of recharging station is much lower than the cost of a plant for treatment of the lake water. So this is a principle. Now, and water uptake to feed the aquifer, there is a treatment, obviously, because the water coming from the mountain has to be filtrated, and then some infiltration in the soil, with an area for infiltration that has a capacity of 10 million cubic meters of infiltration. Now that we have this station here close to the river, and then the 14 wells shared out between France and Switzerland, and the cost of artificial feeding was shared across the users in the two countries. At the same time that we had to have this technical development, there have been meetings and negotiations with the various local and national authorities in France in order to establish a management system, a common management system of water. So we created what we called a kind of arrangement. It's an agreement whereby there is an exploitation committee, a management committee per annum, the right to water of every user, and the price of the water. This agreement was concluded on June 19, 1978 for a duration of 30 years. The role of the Commission was very important, was key, because it was more than an advisory commission. It was really at the heart of a discussion for managing all the plans, and also addressing problems linked to maintenance of all these plans. And this commission is in charge of reviewing the annual water plans, and the Commission also does supervise the budget. It does undertake cross-border studies, and the Commission is composed of representatives of the Geneva region and also the French authorities, as well as the industrial community, who are the key stakeholders. Members can be accompanied by experts, and meetings are held once or twice a year in rotation between France and Switzerland. In 2007, we had to work on the review of this first agreement, and a working group, a Franco-Swiss working group, was put in place in order to produce a basic document for the management of the Geneva resources for the next 30 years with a legal support to be recognized internationally. So the legal support had to ensure that the technical specificities agreed upon should be part of an overall context that is politically, legally, financially, and administratively recognized. So we established cross-border legal basis on which the new agreement had to be operated. We specifically, we did base ourselves on the Cal-Rouche agreement, Article 5, which was very important for the French part.
Fédérale suisse parce que les cantons.
And also it was compliant with constitution of a federal Swiss constitution, because the cantons can conclude treaties and can conclude agreements. And this agreement on the use, recharge, and monitoring of a Franco-Swiss groundwater was signed on 18 December and entered into force on January 1st, 2008 for a duration. A few words on the convention and the agreement. The agreement was to ensure the sustainability of a Franco-Swiss water table of a Geneva region, and thus guaranteeing the parties the capacity of draw water intended for the drinking water. It was also aimed at defining the administrative, legal, technical, and financial provisions necessary for the proper execution of a mission. So it was focusing on the technical, legal aspects of international law. It does provide for an inclusion of the French communes whose power has been formally and officially increased, and it was concluded for a period of 30 years, renewable once by mutual agreement between the parties, and it is a follow-up of the 1978 arrangement. What we can note today, after 40 years, we have a water table level that is on average satisfactory in order to respond to all the needs specific with a pumping of 7 to 10 cubic meter per year with through an artificial recharge of 7 to 10 million square meters to have an average level of water table which will not be overexploited. What can be said as a way of conclusion during these recent years? A few key elements have contributed to the success of the 1978 arrangements and the preparation of the successor agreement. It was through the capacity to focus on the common water resource and to treat at local level the administrative and political aspect of aquifer management. And we are very lucky that the canton of Geneva had the capacity to deal directly with all the cross-border issues. I'll stop here, and I will be very glad to answer your question, and thank you very much for your kindness for listening.
Nous avions prévu une session de questions et réponses après les présentations des trois panélistes. On est un petit peu en retard sur le...
Thank you, Gabriel, for this presentation. We're a little late on our schedule here, so I suggest that you put questions in the chat. And We will come back to them later if we have time. So we're going now to introduce this next panelist, Mr. Ababakar Ndao, who is the founder of Polo Dakar, and who has worked extensively in the basins of Gambia and Senegal. He was the Secretary General of OMVG, the Gambia River Basin Development Organization, and has worked on consultation between water users for many years. Ababakar Ndao, the floor is yours. Thank you, Jean, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening from Western Africa, from Dakar. It's a pleasure for me to participate in this webinar in the name of Polo Dakar. I'm Secretary General of OMVG, and thank you to our Chinese partners, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Water, and our research partners. And thank you also individually to all the participants and organizers of this webinar. I'm going to talk to you about surface water. But as was discussed by some of my colleagues here, surface waters are often linked to the use of groundwater. I'm going to tell you how two organizations managed to apply an integrated management of water resources that come from two rivers and that are shared water resources. You see the maps on the screen here just to illustrate the geographical area that we've worked on. So we have 6 countries altogether and 4 countries per basin. And there are 2 countries that are members of both organizations, Senegal and Guinea. Perhaps the next slide, please. Thank you, Jean. So here is a summary of what I'm going to go through. First of all, the background information to introduce you to our local water resources. Then I will talk about what is at stake, commitments and objectives, then the implementation of institutional work and decisions, before moving on to the implementation of the consultation for integrated water resource management, and then a conclusion. So historically, the idea was to explain the existence of OMVS. So in the past, we together attempted to manage the aquifer jointly. And then we had to go through a series of crises in the 1970s with several droughts that underlined the limits of the production system based on rainfall. And so this also underlined the fragile aspect of the economy and the country. So this is when we began to understand that we were in a situation of crises, but perhaps better planning and a better use of transborder rivers might help us to better manage these crises. So in 1972, we began this collaboration and created the organization in 1978. So the countries chose to cooperate in order to develop the better use of water resources and integrated management of these water resources to make them more sustainable. And of course, For this, a number of commitments needed to be made, and these have been implemented through a number of agreements. The rivers were first declared international rivers, and then we signed a number of conventions in order to agree upon the implementation of a common management of the rivers. And of course, these conventions stipulate a better planning, the implementation of an improved infrastructure in legal, technical, and financial terms. The next step was to define how we could manage sharing access to these waters in an efficient way. So this convention defines this through several principles. First of all, the recognition of the multisectoral aspect of water, including the needs of water for the environment, because the specific aspect of surface water is that it is used to produce energy, of course, electricity mainly. And this is a sector that takes up a lot of water. And of course, in parallel, we have the other uses of water, which are for human consumption, animal consumption, irrigation, agriculture, etc. So we signed this charter on water regarding the consumption of water, and human consumption was of course privileged and placed as the most important use of water before that of water for irrigation, energy, etc. The charter also guarantees access to water to the states, access to information as well, as information plays a key role in the efficient management of water resources. And states also had to commit to providing data about water resources in their part of the region. It is also necessary to develop potential data about the impacts of water usage in the long term and feed scientific tools that were used in order to inform different parties. So a common institution was created under the aegis of the states and the High Commission, and a number of specialized consultative commissions, advisory committees for the integrated management of water. So this commission was created in 1972 since the building of dams and has been active ever since. And it sits acts in the name of the states and the High Commission for the Secretariat. Little by little, we realized that it was extremely important to involve the communities and water users. Of course, the states were very efficient in managing programs and projects, but implementing users directly was also necessary. So the Basin Committee for Users was then created. Next slide, please. Through the CPE. So the CPE provides its opinion based on texts and simulations that are carried out using technical and scientific tools on water management. This in order to share its opinion on the principles and modalities of equal sharing of water between the states and the users as well, instructions regarding requests and needs in terms of water usage for specific projects, the close monitoring of the use of water and the influx of water into Fleuve Sénégal, and the evaluation of the rules in terms of water use, and of course the rate applied, because of course the use of water is something that is charged for. And for this, in view of a reliable consultation and the reassurance of actors and diverse tools were developed in order for an efficient sharing in terms of costs. And now we move on to the Basin Committee. The Basin Committee has a larger scope in terms of bringing together all the users at an institutional and individual level in order to better manage water usage of the river. So we have the main axis of water management, the improved management of water resources, the protection of the environment, and the policy in terms of rates applied to the use of water. And of course, conflict resolution when there are conflicts around water management. So this committee is made up of several different groups. So we have the groups for the public sector, so the different institutions. Then we have the group of users. Then we have all the users in terms of agriculture, individual users, etc. Then we have the group of civil society, NGOs, and associations of users. And then, of course, we decided to create the group of experts. So this brings together the scientific community in terms of academia, etc., in order to get their opinion on water usage. This is a valid and solid, useful system that is presided by a person that is elected and who is also part of the Commission on Water. And finally, I'm going to move on to the conclusions, lessons, and views for the future. So our system seems quite reliable because it is based on trust, consultation, and cooperation. It has existed for over 50 years. And until up to today, we have managed to solve conflicts on several occasions. And what is important to understand is that we have the commitment of chiefs of states at a very high level. So they define the orientations of the organizations, and we have the Council of Ministers that closely follows any conflicts that arise, makes decisions, and also intervenes on a regular basis in order to support consultation and move forward. It is also important to note that there is a need to develop data acquisition tools, monitoring tools, and water management tools in terms of water costs sharing, and this has to be shared between states and users. The right of all parties involved has to be respected, of course, for this to function and for participants and parties to maintain their commitment. The consultation is enlarged to all the actors involved on the basis of a combination of agreements, of course, and integrated management tools. Because people and parties need something to base themselves on in order to defend their water use and their rights. Then, of course, there needs to be an understanding of climate change and the impacts that it has on water usage. We have dams, of course. We have dams and reservoirs that we use to store water. And we realized that it was important to take into account all the aspects with each parties involved, like Jean mentioned earlier, regarding the shared aquifer basin, because we are convinced that if we combine the management of surface waters and groundwaters, then we will, of course, be more efficient in terms of water management in shared circumstances. Because climate change, of course, has impacted resources and increased the depletion of resources. And we need to consider this and include this aspect in our projects. Projects have been developed around the economy of water because farmers, of course, have to be taken into account, their needs and their use of water. I think I will stop here. And for the SMAD project, of course, I thank the Swiss partners, YGRAC, and the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation that supports an integrated management of water resources in our area. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Babacar Ndao.
Thank you very much,
We're now
going we're going to have a third analysis, and it's a pleasure for me to
welcome Dr. Elizabeth Sirko-Woods,
newly appointed director of YGRAC. And Elizabeth will tell us about how to manage, and she has been doing that on an aquifer based in northern Chile. Without further ado, I give the floor to you. Thank you very much, Jean, and thank you for inviting us to this webinar, which is very interesting. On YGRAC, we are an independent center of category 2 of UNESCO, but independent from UNESCO. We are working just like all other category 2 institutions in close collaboration with UNESCO. We have projects and programs and activities together with UNESCO. I prepare my presentation in French, so I will continue in French, sorry, in English rather. It's a very brief presentation, just to highlight and pinpoint part of knowledge of a resource, which is very important indeed, and that can support decision-making, management in semi-arid and transboundary aquifer management. I do hope that you can see my screen. Thank you.
So in arid areas, surface water is almost inexistent and sporadic.
Alors, dans les zones arides, l'eau de surface
and the surface expression of groundwater. This figure shows a west-east profile of North Chile with the Andean Cordillera on the east and the Pacific Ocean on the west. There, the hydrogeological processes are controlled by large endorheic basins. I will see if I can take the pointer. Yeah, large endorheic basins, as we can see here, with the accumulation of several hundred of meters up to 1,000 meters of detritic sediments from the erosion of the Andean Cordillera. Most of the recharge of those basins occurred during the late Pleistocene and early Holocene, so large volume of groundwater have been stored, but is mainly fossil. So there is also a modern recharge. The average of precipitation is between 150 to 200 millimeter per year in the Cordillera, almost nil in the central part of the Atacama Desert that we have here, Central Depression. But here, the recharge of the aquifer is alloptone. So as in all arid areas, precipitation are much lower than evaporation, there with factor 10 as a minimum. And in the lower topographic areas, groundwater is very shallow, with less than 2 meters deep, and sometimes upwelling. So we have very specific ecosystem developed that are developing in this context. Like, for example, salt lake, wetlands, phytophytic vegetation, and trees like tamarugos, and of course also human developments with farming. So the groundwater the groundwater is a strategic resource since pre-colonial time in this area, and the different users are the population and the water supply, the mining and companies, the farmers, and the Native Americans, and of course the environment. So the water department, Chilean Water Department, monitor groundwater, realizes assessments in order to grant water rights, but the number of water rights, groundwater rights, increased more than 4,000% between 2001 and 2017. So this has led to a number of problems and intensification of conflicts, and with posing the question of which management. In Chile, in the case of aquifers with a recharge much smaller than the volume stored, mainly non-renewable groundwater, the calculation of the available safe groundwater yield is equivalent to the recharge rate plus 5% of the total volume stored over a period of 50 years. So the average decline since the 90s is around 5.5 to 6 centimeters per year. That means 1 to 2 meters in 2 decades. And according to the Water Department calculations in 2010, the extracted yield exceeded 5% of the volume stored. So therefore, the aquifer was declared restricted areas, and in theory, no more permanent groundwater rights could be granted. However, the observation of the temporal data of piezometric level in the monitoring wells show a very high variability, with some place with a higher decline, almost 1.2 meters per year, but also areas where the piezometric level was stable, and other area where the piezometric level was even increasing. So the resource is not threatened in the short and medium term because of the extraction, but knowing that so the small users have lost access to water if they were not able to deepen their well, and if they're not also able to have their groundwater right granted before the declaration of restriction, which is the case of most small users. And local ecosystems, groundwater dependent ecosystem on the other side are severely threatened, in some cases beyond the non-return point, as it has been also mentioned for a case study in China. A decrease of the groundwater level of 0.5 meter below the ground level can leave the roots of the vegetation without water uptake and lead to the wetland drying out. So while the first problem can be solved by technology, deepening wells, to solve the second issue is much more complicated. So in this case, reaching the SDG 6 and managing, implementing a sustainable groundwater management is related to being able to access the groundwater resource, but not a problem of availability of the resource, but without threatening ecosystems, which is the big challenge. And so using fossil or non-renewable groundwater, especially in the context of transboundary aquifers, can be a solution in large and heterogeneous aquifers if extraction wells are located far from the areas where the groundwater well is near the surface, with deeper groundwater, no groundwater dependent ecosystem, and on a limited period, limiting the extension of the depression cones. So two main messages: that the understanding of the groundwater system is key, and also a long-term vision for the territory development. And that's all for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. A warm thank to our three panelists for this very interesting presentations. Unfortunately, we are running behind schedule, so we do not have time for a direct question and answer session. But please do ask your questions in the chats or in the Q&A, and do reach out to us, to the SDC office in China, to connect to our partners and us if you would like to have some exchanges on what has been presented today. Thank you very much for your interest, and wish you a good continuation of session.
Thank you, John. We would like to thank the four speakers for your presentations. We're running out of time, but we still have the last presentation, which is a very interesting and very high quality presentation. The presenter is Associate Professor Luo Jianmei from Hebei GEO University. She is also deeply engaged in our Sino-Swiss cooperation project, and together with Professor Shen, in particular from agriculture water saving, as well as North China Plain water saving project, she actually did great efforts. So today we are very honored to have Ms. Luo to comprehensively report the achievements she made. She personally participated a lot of large-scale as well as provincial level groundwater projects, as well as agriculture plantation projects. You can share your screen now. Thank you for your introduction. Hello, everyone. The topic of my presentation is optimizing planting system and water suitable development in Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei province. We know that irrigation plays a very important role in agriculture development in the whole world. In the irrigation area, with the major source of groundwater, face a very big challenge, which is the overpumped groundwater. So Jingjingji area is just located in this region. As a result, you can see that groundwater resources are facing a lot of challenges. As a result, there are very big damage to the ecological environment. Agriculture is one of the major users of water, and it is also the key of water saving. So in terms of comprehensive water saving, we need to think about 3 dimensions: water saving technology, year-round cropping number, as well as planting structure. In the past, we pay great attention to the technologies. You can see that water saving as well as water use efficiency has been greatly enhanced. However, the groundwater level continues to drop. So this is actually a paradox. the more you save, the more you consume. So based on 20 cases from 14 countries, FAO reported that the total amount of irrigation water doesn't decrease on a regional scale after using water-saving technologies. The saved water was used to expand the planting scale. So in order to break this paradox, water use efficiency is very important, but on the other hand, planting area control is also crucial. From this slide, we would like to discuss with you about the scale as well as the efficiency. First of all, let's look at agriculture production and food supply and demand. Since 1980s, in this region, they mainly plant wheat, maize, vegetable, as well as fruit. And you can see that the production quickly increased. For example, vegetable production increased by 7 times. For these 4 major productions, they played a very important role in supplying to entire China. For example, vegetable. China's vegetable production ranks #1 in the world. In this region, we ranks #3 in China. So those highly intense production, whether this is forced by demand, then we analyzed about the demand. We see that besides rice as well as soybean, which cannot be self-supplied, the other productions are all actually in oversupply conditions. It actually means that with such a high intense production, we just supply the redundant croppings to the other regions. So you can see that the net output of blue virtual water from Hebei Plain is 35.6 plus 10.8 cubic meters. This is actually a mismatch if you think about the over-pumping of the groundwater in this region. From this chart, you can see from 1993 to 2020, the groundwater declined by 7.5 meters in average. And most majority of the overexploitation will be actually consumed by agriculture producers. So we have to think about what kind of produce caused the overexploitation. And the second, how can we actually develop the water suitable development, in particular in terms of agriculture. So here we analyzed the plantation of the major crops, and then we find the biggest consumer of groundwater. It includes wheat, vegetables, as well as fruit. The water needed by these 3 crops actually takes about 90% of the total water consumption. And based on that, we also analyzed about the economic return of these crops. So we can prioritize the plantation of these crops. And then let's deep dive into these 3 different dimensions. First of all, the agriculture water saving, as well as plantation. We have all kinds of field studies and modeling, and we see that in this region, which is actually near the western mountainous area,
so the rainfall is less than 500 millimeters, and it can support 1 single cropping, 1 harvest per year. And if we have the lateral replenishment of 130 millimeters and also the 41 millimeters of these north-south water transfer, then this area can support these 3 harvests for 2 years. So now we have the 1 harvest per year. So the intensity of 3 harvests per 2 years is actually lower. So you can see the current intensity exceeds the capacity. So this is for the Piedmont basin area. We use remote sensing images and also these different models, crop models, and we estimate the water relationship of a different cropping system. And we found that for the 3 harvests of 2 years, every 2 years, it can alleviate the overdraft issue of groundwater. And also for the 4 harvests per 3 years, it can achieve some balance, achieve the balance of the exploitation of the groundwater. So it does not take into account the water transfer. And if we take into account the water transfer, then the key grain crops, with these external transfer of water, we can develop some, 2 croppings per year or 3 croppings per 2 years. These are the more suitable plantation regime if there is external transfer of water and considering also the grain demand for wheat. And in terms of the planting structure, well, in order to find the reasonable or optimal planting structure, we actually developed 4 scenarios. Scenario 1 is the present trend, and this is to look at the past 15 years of evolution of their cropping structure, and then we get this scenario. The second scenario is self-sufficiency of agricultural products. So we don't serve other areas. Our production only meets the needs of the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region. So it only serves the self-sufficiency without external supply. And then we can look at the water relationship. And then the third scenario is that we have the target of balance of the exploitation of water, and then we look at the maximum grain output under the constraint of water resources. And then the last scenario is coordination of grain crops, cash crops, and also water needs. By constructing models, and we also use genetic algorithms, and we estimate these future population, income, and also the consumption structure. And eventually, we have these supply and demand of the crop demands and supplied. And then we look at the water consumption. So here you can see these 4 scenarios can actually save water of 1 billion to 6.7 billion cubic meters. It can also conserve some land resources, and it can improve the ecological benefits to a large extent. In order to verify the results of optimization, we also look at the sustainability of the water use. So from this picture, you can see there are 3 lines. And these are the kind of critical threshold of sustainability of water use. The first and the second is without taking into account the external transfer. And this is kind of the capacity, the threshold of the water available. And one is, industrial, commercial, and residential water, and etc. So that's balancing total overdraft. And the second curve is balancing agricultural overdraft. And then the third, critical threshold is considering or taking into account the south-north water transfer. And then we look at the different production years. You can see for most of the production years that they were not sustainable. So even if we have water from the south-north water transfer project, the average water use is still above this threshold or near the threshold value. So if we follow the current planting regime and structure, then there will be a crisis. Therefore, the optimization of the planting structure is the future trend and is the way forward. And here you can see the different scenarios for the future optimization. We need to move along this line, this arrow. And here on this picture, we found that if we don't consider the external transfer of water, just like scenario 2, we have self-sufficiency of agricultural products. And then there's a balance of the exploitation of groundwater. And then we can determine the output according to the water available. So that is kind of a more optimal solution. And well, in terms of this water availability, so here, if we only consider water availability to determine the level of output, then the wheat self-sufficiency is only 75%. That is to say, without the external water transfer, we are not able to support the self-sufficiency of wheat. by ourselves or growing by ourselves, we need to have a transfer of water of 25%. And we started the South-North water transfer project. And then with this water, then we have more choices in balancing and improving our plantation structure. So S1 here, you can see the present trend, and this is still near the threshold. It's a critical threshold. And in the future work, at different stages, we might have different grain protection target. So we need to take into account to these grain target, and also perhaps also within this region, within this area, we can optimize the planting structure considering the external transfer of water. And so through this analysis, if we don't have this external water transfer, then we'll have to transfer grain from other regions. If we don't transfer grain from other regions, then we have to transfer water from other areas to achieve a balance of the exploitation of groundwater. So in the future, in terms of the sustainable development of agriculture, we only have two options. One is to transfer water. So we try to have the minimum water transfer volume, 1.1 billion cubic meters. And if we don't transfer water, then we need to transfer grain. So 25% of the grain will have to be transferred from outside. So here you can see this is the change of the water levels at different scenarios with the South-North water transfer projects. In most of the scenarios, we can achieve a balance of the exploitation. So for the cash crops, such as vegetables and fruits, if we want to keep the current volume of fruits and vegetable production, then it's very difficult to have a balance here. So lastly, we also talk about efficiency and think about the water-saving technologies. According to the sustainable threshold, and here we can see when it reaches the balance point, this is the value we might have. And in order to achieve the agriculture balance, the balance of the agricultural exploitation, we have to improve the efficiency by 10%. And then in some other scenarios, you can see we already reached the balance of the exploitation of groundwater. If we want to achieve the balance of exploitation of total water, we need to improve the water use efficiency by 20%. However, by analyzing the water use efficiency, we found that in this research region, this is a kind of a region with a very good water efficient technologies. So their water use efficiency has already reached the internationally advanced level. So there's a very low likelihood that we can continue to improve by 20%. And here, later on, we analyze if we can improve the WUE, water use efficiency, by 10%, what is the relationship between the grain production and the water use? So there are many scenarios here. So let's just look at the present trend, present scenario. If we improve the 10% of the WUE, what would be the grain production and the water usage? Here in this picture, TCW represents by reducing evapotranspiration, we can improve the water use efficiency, and this is by improving the yield. So here we discover if we only rely on the reduction of evapotranspiration, if WUE increased by 10%, then we can save the water of 31%. So this would be the saving of from this bar to that bar. And if we only, but here the total output does not change. If we only rely on the yield increase to improve the WUE by 10%, then we can increase the output by 12%, and the water use actually did not decline but increased. So we can see that if the yield increased, then the volume, the total production volume also increased. So in reality, here you can see this is a range of water efficiency and the change of the production. So here, this is an analysis of by just improving the water use efficiency. And here, the last slide, while optimizing the plantation structure and also improving the water use efficiency, we put these two together to look at their sustainability. And here, this point represents the present, the current, the status quo, and the average status of the status quo. If we only think about the improvement of the plantation structure, that's a scenario 4, and this is the threshold. This is only by optimizing the structure. So the water efficiency improved by 15% and the production increased by 1%. And if we just relying on reducing evapotranspiration and improve the water use efficiency, then here, this is what we get. That's where the bar was in the previous picture. And here it can actually save water by 31%. If we use these two together, these two measures in a combination, then here you can see while the structure, planting structure is improved, we also improve the water use efficiency. And in this sense, we can save the water by 40%. So through the analysis, we can draw the following conclusions. Firstly, the current planting structure is highly water consuming. Wheat, maize, vegetables, and fruit are the major water consuming crops, accounting for 90% of the water use for the crops. And then second, in terms of the cropping system, if we have external water transfer from south-north water transfer, we can have these 2 harvests a year and a certain proportion of 3 harvests in 2 years. But if there is no water transfer from outside, then in our region, the water resources can only support 4 harvests per 3 years. And if we just improving the structure, we can reduce the water by 15%. If we just reduce the water evaporation to improve water efficiency by 10%, then water use can be reduced by 31%. If we use these two measures together, it can reduce the water consumption by 40%. So in this scenario, we don't need external water transfer, but we can achieve a balance of agricultural water use. So here, we will need to rely on these external water transfer, and on this ladder we need to rely on technology improvement, but it's very unlikely to happen in practice. Therefore, we can only use water efficiency technologies to maintain the status quo. So we have only 2 options. One is to transfer water from outside. The other is to transfer grain from outside this region. So these are the way forward, and there are a lot of details. In the interest of time, I have not put them on the slides. So I hope you can also pay attention to our report and have discussion. Thank you. So I would like to just stop here for my presentation. Well, thank you, Professor Luo, for your introduction. And indeed,
we know that agriculture is the biggest sector to consume water. In the past, we actually think about the other dimensions, for example, water saving, as well as the technology, etc. We do have a lot of research, but we have very few research about agricultural consumption of the water. So I just want to mention that during G20 summit, President Xi Jinping also specifically emphasized about water security as well as food security. So I think that Ms. Luo's presentation offered a lot of inspirations for us to ensure food security in the long term. In the interest of time, we don't have any Q&A session. If you have any questions, please contact the speaker or contact the SDC office in China. And today, we're also very honored to have the Department of International Cooperation of the Ministry of Water Conservation in China I would like to invite the speaker to give us some closing remarks, Director Wang, because they delivered a lot of support for us during the past 8 years. Okay, thank you, Dr. Wang. Distinguished guests and Honorable Councillor Ms. Nadia Banani, we know that groundwater is a very important component of the natural resources and also an inseparable part in the ecosystem. And it will also guarantee economic security, food security, ecological security, as well as life security. This year, the Global Water Day has the theme of cherish the groundwater. That is why today we host this meeting, which is about the sustainable management and utilization of the groundwater. This is quite timely. So this is also a good summary of the Sino-Swiss cooperation project since the initiation in 2014. The Swiss as well as Chinese experts tried their best to solve the overexploitation in China. They take Guantao County in Hebei province as the pilot region to have in-depth discussions as well as research. Over the past 8 years, through the joint research, we have profound understandings about overexploitation of the groundwater, and we also have to take all kinds of approach to conduct a systematic management. So besides experts from both China as well as Switzerland, we also see that today's seminar also invited experts from Chile, Senegal, as well as the other international organizations. And we discussed together about the groundwater management. I would like to thank all the speakers for your contributions as well as your sharing of the best practices in the international community. This will help us to analyze as well as compare the commonalities as well as differences of groundwater in different countries and regions in the world. Chinese government attaches great importance to the management as well as protection of groundwater. We try to ensure water quality and then to enable sustainable utilization of the groundwater. So in December 2021, we officially adopted groundwater management regulation, but we see that the groundwater management is still an arduous task. I believe that the great achievements made by the Sino-Swiss cooperation project will be a very good demonstration and role model for our future work. We hope that in the future we can further promote the achievements and the result of this project. I still remember that I see that Professor Jing Shibo actually made a presentation on TED. So actually talks about how we can actually measure the water utilization and improve the water use efficiency from the farmers. This is really a very good presentation, and a lot of people understand the importance of groundwater through his presentation. And just now, Dr. Wang and the counselor also mentioned that the water department from both countries keep a close tie with one another. And in terms of flood control, dam security, as well as groundwater, we have a very comprehensive and in-depth cooperation with one another. And the Sino-Swiss cooperation project on groundwater will be completed on December. So here, on behalf of the Ministry of Water Resources of PRC, I would like to thank SDC for a long-term support. I'd also like to thank all the speakers as well as all the experts and the specialists for your contributions. And finally, thank you everyone for taking your time to attend this webinar. Thank you. We are greatly enlightened and inspired. Thank you, Director Jing. Thank you for making such a good summary about today's seminar and also promote the highlights of our Sino-Swiss cooperation project. So I think that on the chat box, you also see some of the content we posted because time is limited. However, if the audience want to have the in-depth understanding about our Sino-Swiss preparation project, please actually look at the lectures online. We almost have more than 10 lectures, which have very good elaboration about the projects as well as the achievements made through these projects. And we also cooperated with IWMI, and we also have a lot of newsletter being posted. And in China, now it's already 7 p.m. and in Switzerland, it's already lunchtime. Thank you for staying with us. And I also hope that you can pay attention to the cooperation between SDC as well as the Ministry of Water Resources in China. We would also like to thank our 6 simultaneous interpreters for your wonderful services for today's webinar. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. See you next time.